Well, welcome, colleagues. It is a minute past the hour, and there are still people joining us, but let us make a start. And let me, by way of housekeeping, share with you that the meeting is recorded and will be posted on the Magna Carta's website. If you could keep your microphones muted, that would be appreciated. We're going to take all of the questions after everybody has spoken, but please don't wait until then to put your question. Could you put it in the chat, please? And that will enable our moderator to judge which questions to take. This is the first in a series of webinars which build to the Magna Carta's anniversary conference being held in Washington for the first time in 2024. We're looking at some of the possible content, and at the end of this webinar there will be a short questionnaire which invites you to make a contribution to that. But without further ado, I'd like to hand now to Professor Ronnie Monk, who is going to be our moderator for the afternoon. Ronnie, over to you.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Carla, for all the work in setting this up. My name is Ronaldo Monk. I've got a foot in two camps, one the Latin American one from whence I originate, and the other here in Europe, where I have been very active on the university civic engagement front for the last 10 years or so. So what we're reporting on today, what we're having a discussion around today, is around a book called I don't know if you see it or not, Higher Education in Latin America and the Caribbean, which the Magna Carta colleagues have put on available for you to download. My co-editors on that publishing venture, which is also a networking venture, were Yavira Pinilla of the Organization of American States, La OEA, and Kathy Barch of the Latin American Center at Penn State University, as well as Rita Hodges, who is here with me today, and she will be our final speaker from Penn State, but also the managing director of a global consortium on civic engagement at universities. So that's why we're here, and that's what hopefully you will join us in discussing. There are many other, there were 15 contributions to the book, but obviously we couldn't get them all here. But we're very fortunate to have with us today Marcelo Knöbel, who is here, former rector of the University of Campinas in Sao Paulo. He's also a member of the Governing Council of the Magna Carta Observatory, hence our link between our Latin American network and the Magna Carta. From Uruguay, we have Agustín Cano from the University of the República. He has only more recently joined this network and had been doing his own networking in this area with Matias Flores at Cornell University. So very welcome, Agustín. Finally, Maria Rosa Tapia from the University of Buenos Aires, who has been with us before and will speak on the general issues of service learning in Latin America, but also the specific experiences of the University of Buenos Aires. But not finally, because finally is Rita Hodges, who will come in with the broader international stance or standpoint, if you want to put it that way, whereby she relates this Latin American experience to the wider international experience. Our position has always been the Latin American experience needs to inform the global debates around civic engagement and democracy at the university, but likewise from Latin America we can learn from experiences in other countries and not just look at our own experience. Before I hand over to our first speaker, Marcelo, just a few words on the broader panorama of university extension in Latin America, and why, from an international perspective, it is very worthwhile to be studying this experience, learning from this experience, engaging with this experience. My understanding is that in Latin America, the university extension, expansion, linkages with communities really begins in 1918 in Córdoba, in the interior of Argentina, with a student revolt. 1918 reminds me of 1968. It was basically a democratization of the university, and the idea that professors could stay in posts forever and not be accountable to anybody would be thrown out as the democratic, if you want, rebellion. But one thing is signaled and explicitly said was that universities needed to engage with their social surrounds, with their local communities. This has taken multiple forms in the years since. It has gone up, it has gone down, but it has remained a tradition within the Latin American university. And I think, to be honest, it hasn't maybe been drawn out enough. It hasn't maybe been theorized enough externally. There's been very much an internal debate, and there are various factions formed within it, which we won't go into now. But overall, I think it is a very rich experience. And after a lull in the 1990s, when, if you want, the neoliberal agenda, in a sense, took over, and linkages with business became the be-all and end-all of the university, as they were here in Ireland and different countries in Europe, of course. But since then, there's been a revival of universities seeking to engage with their societies, seeking to make linkages, seeking to advance, if you want, the knowledge dialogue and the whole idea of the co-creation of knowledge, that we don't just sit in our laboratories or in our think tanks, but that we need to engage with society, and that answers to any issues need to come from a dialogue. And also, I suppose, the issue of social responsibility of the university, which can, I'm quite aware of, can just be lip service to it, but it can also be real. The other thing you see in Latin America, particularly in the Andean countries, and I've been working quite a lot in Ecuador recently with the University of Loja, is that the Latin American universities often have a responsibility to the territory, to their local region. So the issue of regional development, one thing sitting in Sao Paulo or Buenos Aires and Montevideo, but another thing is sitting in provincial universities with very few resources, and local communities expect some form of contribution or engagement by the university. So there's a diversity of issues out there. They're all very interesting. I will now be quiet. I will mute myself and ask Marcelo to take the floor on behalf of his experience and the wider experience in Latin America and our link with Magna Carta. Marcelo.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ronnie. It's a pleasure to be here talking with you. It's very nice having this opportunity to discuss these issues that we really are very important in the context of Latin American universities. And in fact, this is something that Latin America can really teach something different and some really important experiences to the rest of the world. So the idea of, as you mentioned before, the university extension, the idea of having a participation in the communities is very much connected to the idea of university in the Latin America context. In this seminar, as mentioned before, I also would like to mention that I have a double hat here. I participate in the governing council of the Magna Carta, and it's important to mention that in the new version of the Magna Carta, the 2020 version of the Magna Carta, it's explicit this idea of the connection with communities. And for those of you who are participating in this webinar and don't know this Magna Carta, please go to the Magna Carta website and take a look. All the universities, of course, are invited to sign the Magna Carta, which are important in terms of the values, the fundamental values of universities all around the world. And it's very much connected to what we are discussing here in this interesting webinar. So before starting, I would like to mention that in this book that Ronnie mentioned, we participated in a really interesting meeting in, I think it was 2 years ago or 1 year ago. Nowadays, after the pandemic, we all lost the ability to think about time properly. But anyway, there is a very good book that is free for downloading. And in that book, I had the pleasure to write a chapter about the Brazilian experience on university extension. Let me just read 2 paragraphs of that book, of that chapter. The important thing about initially, as I am the starting speaker, I would like to call the attention to nomenclature. So it's important to note that there is no unified understanding of the meaning of the term extension in the higher education sector. We here in Brazil, we use the term extension, and it's very good, well consolidated. Contrary to what happens with research, for example. Everyone knows what research is, but there are different ideas of what extension is. Across countries and regions, both the specific nomenclature and the meaning can be used to convey a wide variety of concepts, including outreach, extension, civic mission, civic engagement, social engagement, third mission, among others, which each one has their own definition and, of course, its limits. It's interesting to mention that in this chapter, we try to recover the history of university extension, or I mean, not the university extension itself, but the institutionalization of the university extension in the Brazilian university context. And there is a consensus here in Brazil about a definition after maybe years and years of debates. So I will read here the last definition that was agreed on in the National Forum of Extension Vice Presidents. By the way, just to mention that in Brazil, for example, every single university has an extension vice president, which is, you can see that it shows the importance that this area has to the university by itself. So the definition is: university extension, under the constitutional principle of inseparability between teaching, research, and extension, is an interdisciplinary, educative, cultural, scientific, and political process that promotes the transformative interaction between the university and other society sectors. So the idea is that we have strong connections with research, with teaching and learning processes, as well as we are all the sectors of universities and the society as a whole. So we have the definition explicit that this should be a part of the university activities as a whole, and for that, every single faculty member should be also promoted. Everything should be there should be incentives in order to the faculty members, the staff members, all participate in this important activity. By the way, as Ronnie mentioned, here in Latin America, we have these important processes of the universities in many places, which are the only place where you can find cultural activities, where you can have sometimes a hospital or a good hospital. You can find some important activities for assistance to improve processes in communities in many places around the country. So the universities play a role of a very important role in many places, and this is all the whole importance of the university connection with society. It embraces many activities. You can go, for example, as mentioned before, from cultural activities to health activities, to empowerment, engagement activities with society in political discussions, for example, or you can have even in some universities, even the innovation sector, the entrepreneurship sector is also part of the extension vice presidency, let's say, as it happens in the University of Campinas, in Unicamp in Brazil, where I had also the pleasure to be the rector. By the way, there are many other ways in order to connect with the community. So let me simply tell you about an idea that we had at the University of Campinas that is also really important. Besides having the vice presidency of extension and culture, where this is how it's called in the University of Campinas, when I was during my term, I realized that we needed a place to discuss human rights. So we found many initiatives that there are at the university that were dispersed in many other parts. And therefore we created an executive directorship, which has the role of a vice presidency, if you want, to deal with human rights. And in this human rights directorship, we included all the issues regarding accessibility for people who need some kind of accessibility in the university. We created a refugee cathedra in order to try to have some support for refugees in our campuses. An observatory of human rights. We created a special commission on gender and sexuality. We created a commission for ethnic and racial diversity. We created a commission for the inclusion and participation of native Brazilian, what we call povos indígenas. And we created as well a specific commission that to the changes that we are facing in our world, the global warming, the ecological and environmental justice that we are facing right now. So this, as you can see, it's a broad range of activities that the university performs together with different sectors of society in order to create a discussion, to understand what's going on, to make specific actions regarding different issues that we all face as a society. One final comment I would like to point out is that we as a university, higher education sector, in my personal opinion, we are failing to communicate all these broad range of activities that we provide to the society, to opinion formers in our some important stakeholders in our society that support these activities and really don't realize why the universities are really important for society. This is absolutely fundamental. Let me tell you that we faced here in Brazil recently a federal government, an administration that didn't believe in the value of public universities, didn't believe in the value of the democracy, didn't believe in the value of education and science for the future. And to communicate that to the whole society is a fundamental role for universities that, in my personal opinion, we are still failing to do so. So this is maybe the first ideas I would like to share with you, and then I will be here for the debate and to answer any question that would eventually happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. That was an extremely effective opening statement. And I think I hadn't realized really the diversity of civic engagement in Brazil, that you were taking on human rights, health, cultural issues. That's probably quite a unique experience. But we shall hear more. Thank you very much. I would think, Cano, now the experience of Uruguay, but also any broader comments, of course, that you may wish to make. Agustin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ronaldo. May I share, please, my presentation? I have some slides to share with you.
Carla?
Yes, no. Thank you, Carla. Here we are.
Okay, good.
Yes. Let's see if I may. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Ronaldo Munk and the Magna Carta Observatory for the opportunity to exchange with such important colleagues on a topic that is both relevant and necessary in our world today: the engagement of universities with society, its problems, pains, and dreams. In my case, this exchange is part of a work process that, as Ronaldo said at the beginning, we have been together with my colleague Matias Flores, a PhD student of Cornell University, with Scott Peters, the professor at Cornell, and among other colleagues from Uruguay, Argentina, and South America. We have been trying to put in dialogue the Latin American tradition of community engagement with other approaches, concepts, and contexts. Secondly, I must issue a warning. Uruguayan higher education system is made up of institutions of very different weights. The University of the Republic, UDELAR, was until 1985 the only institution of higher education in the country. Currently, in addition to UDELAR, there is only one technological university and only 5 private institutions. UDELAR represents the 85% of the system student enrollment, and university extension or community engagement has had historically a very important development at this university, UDELAR, to the point that today it is a university function along with research and teaching that professors must perform. For these reasons, I will focus on this university to comment on some characteristics of the whole Uruguayan case. And the last warning I will make is that the term university extension has taken root in Latin American tradition, even though, as Marcelo said just now, at the present there is a variety of the denominations, and within the denominations, some polemics on the content, approaches, concepts, conceptions, and so on. So today I will use as a synonym university extension and community engagement. University extension appears early in the main Latin American university, first as a replica of the European model, but shortly after arriving in Latin America, the university extension lived a double process of redefinition and politicization. Politicization not in the sense of parties, but in terms of commitment to social issues. From its incorporation, as Ronaldo said before, as part of the program of the university reform process known as the Córdoba Reform of 1918, which was a particular type of university modernization, strongly oriented towards the democratization of the university and its role in the democratization of society. Sorry. And out of such redefinition and politicization arose a new kind of community engagement that we can call of reformist matrix, which is different from its European predecessor. I believe that we can distinguish three great branches of community engagement or reformist matrix in Latin America. First one, community engagement as a link with the subaltern sectors of society, whether organized or unorganized. Secondly, as an orientation of science to the study of the great national problems, taking the expression of the reformist movement. A strand that linked research with application context oriented to address productive and social problems from a sovereign science policies. And third, the branch that put in first place the pedagogical importance of the community engagement, understanding it as a means to remedy the partial character of the professional formation of University of Positivist Heritage, and to favor a more integral formation to include the ethical, humanist, and social dimension. The case of Uruguay clearly expresses the presence of these three aspects, with a particular weight of the third one. The definition of university extension approved by UDELAR in 2009 updated components of the three aforementioned reformist traditions. It favored the integration of the three university missions, teaching, research, and community engagement, underlined the formative role of extension, promoted the work with the subaltern sectors of society, promoted a dialogical and collaborative relationship between academics and the community, among other elements. Here in the slide, we can read a brief part of this definition that says define university extension as a transformative educational process where everyone can learn and teach, as a process that contributes to the production of knowledge, which critically links academic knowledge with popular knowledge, as a process that tends to promote associative and group forms that contribute to overcome significant problems at the social level, as a function that allows guiding lines of research and teaching plans, as a function that has a pedagogical dimension and is can be think as a methodology of integral and humanizing learning, and that must be carried out with the participation and involvement of social and university actors in the whole of the process, no? Planning, implementation, and also evaluation. This definition came along with a strong community engagement policy developed up to the present. At the central level, there are 4 areas. We have, as Marcelo commented by the Brazilian case, we also have a vice president of extension, a central commission with these 4 areas. The first, promotion of community engagement. The second one, cooperative studies. Third one, productive sector and social organizations, and human rights, as well as 2 territorial programs, APEX and PIM, both in peripheral areas of Montevideo. These areas develop engagement actions, calls for projects, training proposals, research, academic events, and publications. In turn, these areas are linked to an engagement network composed of units for all schools and regional centers of Uruguay. One of the devices that have been consolidated for the development of integrality in the different areas of knowledge are these espacios de formación integral or integral formation spaces. These devices are flexible spaces that allow integrating extension into the curricula through different modalities. In 12 years, 1,645 spaces of this one, EFI, and 1,336 projects were developed, involving more than 9,800 students and more than 645 organizations and hundreds of teachers from all areas of knowledge. So it's an important policy that needs still to be evaluated. Well, I think I will finish here, maybe with just a brief comment. The present time of war, pandemics, climate crisis, forced migrations, and growing inequality requires universities to strengthen their involvement with society, not only through projects of productive modernization and application of knowledge to the globalized economy, but also in terms of cultural dialogue, strengthening of democracy, human rights, and the construction of more just society together with communities. On this path, sharing experiences and consolidating the area of community engagement as a field of educational research are fundamental tasks. For all that, congratulations for the book that you have made and for the opportunity to exchange today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agustin. Thank you very much for that very wide-ranging presentation. There are many things we could talk about, and I'm sure there will be questions later. One thing that struck me is that you talked about integral formation spaces and how it was important to integrate engagement into the curriculum. I think that's maybe the biggest challenge everywhere, even those places where we have civic engagement recognized and we have vice presidents and we have a commitment. It tends to be seen as a third space or third leg alongside teaching and research. Whereas I think we would probably all agree in this day and age that engagement needs to be integrated. So the espacios de integración, the integration spaces, sounds like a very good idea to me. And thank you very much. We will return to this. Without further ado, we pass to Maria Rosa Tapia from the University of Buenos Aires, who again will inform us on the situation in Buenos Aires, but also hopefully a wider reflection from their long-standing experience in this field. Maria Rosa, over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I will see if I can share my presentation, but first let me thank you, Ronald, and for the opportunity to gather our experiences in the book, particularly with Catalina Nosiglia, the the provost at the University of Buenos Aires. And thank you to Magna Carta to have this meeting to get together again to keep discussing on these meaningful issues. I will talk with my two hats because, as Ronald knows, I also belong to the Latin American Center of Solidarity Service Learning, from which we have been promoting service learning. I will explain more about how we integrate extension, research, and teaching in universities, and also working with other educational institutions for more than 20 years. And from our perspective, connected with other service learning or community engagement global networks to which we have been working in these years. And also now we are coordinating a particular network for higher education, Catholic higher education, to institutionalized service learning. And I want to point this because, as Ronald just mentioned, it's very difficult to integrate an institution this integration of the three Ibero-American network, from where many of the dear colleagues can also address. And we have a particular network for Argentina, and that's where I want to point out in my presentation. Service learning as a pedagogical approach to integrate extension, academic, and research has been a public policy in Argentina from 1997, from a special program that was developed within the Ministry of Education called Educación Solidaria, Solidarity Education. From 2000, from the National Ministry of Education, there's a service learning program that also promotes a presidential award to highlight the best educational solidarity projects. Because I agree with what Marcelo was saying, it's really hard for the rest of the people to learn what is going on in the institutions with the community. So it was integrated in the educational law in 2006, and recently in 2021, pointing particularly at the universities, from the Ministry of Education, they particularly promoted in the National Inter-University Council to promote the extension curricularization. So I will focus on this curricularization of extension because it has been key in the process of our higher education in Argentina. If we focus on the process of the University of Buenos Aires, you know, it's a mega university. We have more than 320,000 undergraduate students, 13 academic units, 6 public hospitals, 6 schools. It's a mega university, so all the process take, as you can imagine, a lot of time to be really implemented. In fact, the commitment of the university with the civic engagement was also stated in the university in 1821. But as Ronald was mentioning at the beginning of the session, the key landmark in the extension process was the university reform of 1918 that led many years later to the formalization of the integration of the extension with the other pillars of the universities. Let me move forward in our timeline. This 1918 landmark not only promoted the university autonomy or the co-government of the students, faculty, to this democratization of the university, but also the establishment of the extension as a service to the people. That was a key goal for the national universities, mainly to focus on how all this knowledge produced in the university had to be as a service to the people, mainly through extension. So as time went by, in 2010, these educational social practices were stated at the university as a pedagogical proposal to integrate research, teaching, and extension to showcase how this knowledge had to be a concrete benefit for a social field, and these activities had to be mandatory for every student to be able to have their degree. These educational social practices had to have a formative component. They have to be developed within the teaching process. So the knowledge acquired by the students had to be developed also in extra academic spaces and aim for the society to provide the community this meaningful knowledge that was acquired through academics. So these educational social practices not only would be developed by extension, but also inserted academically. So within the teaching process, these activities with the community had to be integrated. So there were many different ways, as I mentioned, with so many students trying to make this mandatory. There had to be different approaches to make this a reality. So all the extension projects could also be integrated, and there's where we also included the curricularization of extension term. That was key also to have a renewed perspective of the extension. Extension was not away from academic, but it could be curricularized. It could be integrated in the curricula through these educational social practices. Many activities that could also be developed with public institutions or civic societies, organizations, as Agustin was mentioned, all these activities that were developed with different NGOs could be integrated in the curricula. So for instance, students from architecture could help small NGOs to develop their plans to get better grants to build community buildings, or many different activities were developed in different contexts from different faculties, integrating their learning with a concrete service with the community. We did a survey in the university. You know, our country is quite wide, and even though the University of Buenos Aires is located in Buenos Aires city, there are many different projects developed all around our country in different contexts, integrating different communities according to the capabilities of the different students that are studying different careers with the concrete needs of the communities. Just to finish, I will just want to share this small video, and let me see if I can. So at least you can see some images of what we are promoting now from the University of Buenos Aires, a program that is called UBA in Action, where after working many years in different locations, well, they are stated, okay, this weekend we are going to be working in this particular community, and students from odontology or promote, for instance, how to prevent illnesses or to provide concrete services for free from the odontology students working along with the faculties, or for example, the students of veterinary go there and look after the health of the students, promoting that the people will not be contagious or will have zoonosis problems, or they also provide legal advice, or from the different faculties, they go to this community to receive different persons of the community to address their particular needs. So this is done all around the year in different communities to be able to practice not only what they are learning, but also to develop many soft skills regarding communication, organization, logistics, and many other things that they also learn during this process, but mainly they can discover how they can concretely be in touch with the community and develop their civic commitment. So, well, there's a lot to tell. I can, if you want, I can give you later links of how to access to more publications regarding on institutionalization or the process that has been developed at the University of Buenos Aires. But I will just stop now to give more time to the dialogue. Thank you.
Maria Rosa, thank you ever so much. A very interesting presentation, as I knew it would be. Just two things that spring to my mind. You mentioned the issue of integration, like Agustin did, and you won't mind me being critical or trying to pull out things here. If we integrate teaching, research, and engagement, are we in danger of, to some extent, diluting the engagement mission? That's just the question. I think it should be integrated, but sometimes we find that maybe it needs to be pursued in its own right. That's just the question. The second question, you talked about the UBA responding to the concrete needs of the community. But what we find is that even with very well-established and quite well endowed universities, there is a very real limit to what a university can do. And now facing a new government in Argentina, will it even be possible to do the minimum if the government abolishes the central bank, abolishes the Department of Education, and so on and so forth? So I'm bringing in that other dimension. These are just things maybe they're self-critical reflections. And thank you very much. And thank you all three speakers for having kept to the time. That is not a minor achievement. I think it is a major achievement. So I'm delighted with that. Rita, therefore, hand over to you to wrap up and comment before we open the floor to discussion. Rita.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ronnie, and thank you to our wonderful speakers who preceded me. I'm very honored to be here. And thank you also to David Locke and the other partners at the Magna Carta Observatory. So I am based at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I also serve as the Executive Secretary of the International Consortium for Higher Education, Civic Responsibility, and Democracy. So I'll be brief, but just wanted to provide a few comments from where I sit. So first, just want to again acknowledge how pleased we are to be partners in the publication that surfaced the book that the conversation we're having today. Ronnie held it up earlier. I'm not sure it was clear. So our book on higher education in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I'm very pleased to have partnered with Ronnie as our lead coordinating editor, as well as our co-editors, as he mentioned, Yadira Pinilla at the Organization of American States, and my dear colleague at the University of Pennsylvania, Kathy Bartsch from the Center for Latin American and Latinx Studies here at Penn. And so today's session comes from initially from this book and an effort that our centers had put together to bring a virtual conference around trying to help establish a learning community among higher education associations and leaders in the Latin American Caribbean region. And this has been critical in the effort to help bring the voices of Latin America and the Caribbean to the global dialogue that we have been having as part of the International Consortium and our other partners who I'll speak about in just a minute. But again, where I sit here at the Netter Center for Community Partnerships at the University of Pennsylvania, we have been doing our work for 30 years in our local geographic community of West Philadelphia. And our mission is really about bringing together the resources and the assets of both the university and the wider local community to develop and help implement what we describe as democratic, mutually beneficial, and mutually transformative partnerships, place-based partnerships between Penn and West Philadelphia that improve simultaneously the research, teaching, learning, and service at our institution and the quality of life in the community. So I resonate very much with what we have heard from our guests from 3 different universities in the Latin American region. The Netter Center has also, since its beginning, helped develop and work with regional, national, and global networks to advance higher education's democratic mission, and especially its local democratic mission. These networks help us learn from and with each other to help stimulate change in other localities because the work is so local and place-based, and really to help develop a global movement and global dialogue to advance this work within higher education at large. So to that end, as mentioned, we house the executive offices of the International Consortium for Higher Education, Civic Responsibility, and Democracy. And I'm very honored to serve as the executive secretary with my founding director at the Netter Center, Ira Harkavy, as our founding chair. Very pleased that the Magna Carta Observatory is part of our steering committee and that we work with the Organization of American States, the Council of Europe, and the International Association of Universities for what we call the Global Cooperation for the Democratic Mission of Higher Education. And Ronnie has been a key partner in this work for many years as well. This formally got named just in 2021 as the Global Cooperation, but it builds on over 20 years of largely European, North American cooperation between our international consortium and the Council of Europe. And so the work that we've been doing to produce this book and to have these conversations was out of a clear recognition to really elevate the voices, as I mentioned, the voices, the expertise, the experience of our colleagues in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is necessary not only for global dialogue, but also to help build this genuinely local rooted global movement to realize the democratic mission of higher education. And I think that it's critical that our global dialogue and debate for the democratic and civic engagement mission of higher education needs to learn from the Latin American and Caribbean debates and experiences. And that's been made even clearer for me today. I think the conversation so far has really resonated with the experiences certainly that we have in the United States, and also what I hear is happening on a global level. The idea of this revival of the university connection to society and to local communities, the critical role of higher education to educate not only able, but also ethical, empathetic, engaged, effective democratic citizens in a democratic society. The idea that there can be many meanings and interpretations of university extension, or what we often are saying of civic and community engagement in our US institutions, and that the definitions and the process with which those actions are taken out very much matter. You know, it was clear to me today from both from the book and from the conversations today that we have many, many promising examples of this work being done in a very meaningful and intentional way, in a way that's very mutually beneficial for our higher education institutions and our local communities, but there is much more work left to be done. I think we spoke today about the need to, and perhaps have some debate around this, but for further integrating this work of extension and community engagement into the core fabric of the university, into the research, teaching, and learning missions of the institutions. And with that, helping to also further institutionalize it within our colleges and universities. The need to more fully and clearly communicate the public role of universities and society, as Marcelo very clearly laid out for us. The need to build more sustained efforts between our institutions and our local community partners, which will require more resources and more public support. I think through Augustine's work, I think we hear what resonates with work in the US around the need to pay close attention to issues of power dynamics in this work, making sure that traditionally marginalized voices are held up, that this is really about co-creation of knowledge and mutuality, bringing our university, our sort of traditional university expertise with the expertise of our local community members to co-produce knowledge, to co-design and implement programming, and be partners with that effort from beginning to end in an iterative, collaborative problem-solving practice that's really around our community-identified needs and issues. So, you know, this critical view really of the work really has deep roots, I think certainly in the US and certainly in Latin America, the need to really take a critical framework to the work of university civic and community engagement. But it's become more proliferated in recent years and is something that we need to continue to explore and discuss in our dialogues. When the work is done best, it certainly has transformative potential, transformation of both our local communities to create more equitable communities and societies, as well as transformation of our institutions themselves and how they behave as institutional actors. But if they are not done with great care and democratic process with our local community members and partners and done through co-creation, then we have we run the risk of exacerbating our inequities in society. So I love the principle that Maria has really emphasized around solidarity as this ethical principle in the work of service learning and of university community engagement. So with that, I think I would like to conclude and just open up for questions that our audience may have of all the speakers. But again, thanks for the opportunity to be here, and thanks to Magna Carta for hosting us today, as well as the co-sponsorship of our partners in the Global Cooperation for the Democratic Mission of Higher Education.
Rita, thank you very much. That very effectively brought us full circle. And some of the terms that you've picked up were ones that I was thinking about as well. In the early days when we started our civic engagement mission in a local deprived community, it worked reasonably well. But what I said year after year is we had to have it embedded within the university structures. We had to make it part of the common sense of everyone at the university. Unless you have these programs embedded, they don't necessarily, they prosper, they work, but they don't have sustainability. But thank you very, very much for picking up that. And you now have the privilege of answering the first question, which comes to you, Rita. you might see it in the chat. It comes from Matias Flores, is in terms of a global movement for civic engagement. What do you see as the challenges for building that dialogue, and what's the difference between a global dialogue and a global movement? Now, that's a good one. And what does the movement look like? Are there common goals? Over to you, Rita, and then we'll open up for everybody. Thank you. Rita, do you want to say briefly on that?
Sure,
What do you
I'll
think?
speak briefly, and Ronnie, I welcome you to also chime in as well as Mark. You've both been part of many of these global conversations and network building that we have been working on together. I mean, to me, I think that it is, you know, it's interesting because it's very relevant to the conversations happening at each of our campuses now, you know, and with the situations that are happening around the world and threats to democracy. But, you know, it's really about bringing people together across differences and across their socio-political contexts and boundaries around then our shared experiences through those different contexts. And then what we can, you know, learn from each other and practices on those contexts and adapt back to our own. They are both related and distinct, but to me, they are, that is the global dialogue and the global movement. So I think that we build a global movement by having global dialogue to build these shared and distinct experiences and best practices and challenges of the work in our various regions and contexts and where this work comes together. But the movement is also about building this into the systems of higher education in our various regions and contexts as well. I'll stop there to see if any of my co-panelists have comments they'd like to add.
Rita, that's very articulate. I think that there is a critical view as well, a more critical view, that the transition from a dialogue, like I write on social movements in Latin America, so this would be my bread and butter. To articulate a movement, it takes more than dialogue or consultation. And I think up until now, sometimes that dialogue has been quite unequal. And even in Ireland, we would have had 15 years ago, whatever, experts coming over and telling us how we had to do civic engagement because they had done it somewhere else. And there has been a tendency for sort of, if you want, a sort of cultural colonialism to set in there. I don't think that's the case now, and I think that's perhaps a major breakthrough of this discussion. And Rita, it's not little thanks to your approach and your very open way of organizing this global dialogue. So thank you very much for your work and for today. If you will allow us, we'll allow as many people now as possible to make the contribution. The Columbus Association asks, as we know, the main challenges is how to mainstream and institutionalize service learning to go beyond isolated experience. This requires resources and active learning approaches. Can the different panelists share any concrete thoughts about this? This is a big question. So very, very briefly, how do you get the resources to continue this work? Should we start? It doesn't matter. Any of you can start. Agustin, Marcelo, Maria Rosa.
Well, this is of course necessary to have a clear vision from the university leadership that the extension is a fundamental part of the university building, and it's absolutely necessary to invest in training, have some budget in order to make these projects happen. So at the University of Campinas, we frequently open calls for applications for programs that are long-term programs that they have this capacity building component, and it's important to make that happen. We have prizes for the best projects that appear. So there is a context on this. It's absolutely fundamental to separate this kind of initiatives that mentioned by the question from the usual things that faculty members eventually do. There is a lot of voluntarism for many people, and many people just go to the approach of some kind of assistantialism. So that this is not what we are looking for. We are looking for a long-term relationship, a connection with the society, and of course, this should have a budget. This should have a clear objective and a vision for the future to develop. So this is absolutely essential. So this is important, and of course the universities that are doing this seriously should think about that.
Thank you, Marcelo. The long-term perspective, certainly. Maria Rosa?
Yes, thank you. I think it's a key question. And as Marcelo said, to have a long-term commitment, institutionalization will also take a lot of time to completely be established. I want to share with you something that we learned with colleagues from Philippines, from De La Salle University, that they developed the Bibingka model. Bibingka is a way on how they cook in Philippines with the fire from the 4 different sides. Because sometimes we talk about a top-down approach. We, of course, need the authorities, the university as a whole, committed in institutionalizing this educational proposal. But we also need committed faculty and students involved in the participation on service learning. But we also need the community to understand what they can do with the university and how they can integrate this link. And also within the institution, someone who will also be lighting the fire from the side through training, through promotions, as Marcelo also addressed, and helping the faculty not only receive more training, but also to help them link better links with the community, because we are changing the way to teach, and faculty will need help to interact with the NGOs or to review their activities, and of course have the institutional support. So this is very interesting how it's for me, it's a key dialogue process to understand how we can enrich from the experience of others, and also to integrate, as you mentioned before, Ronald, not to set apart extension or to set apart academics, but to get together and state clear objectives on how we can learn better, but putting into practice what the students are learning to really commit them for their future commitment with the society and learning with them.
A key point, Maria Rosa. Thank you. Thank you very much. Agustin, briefly, anything to add?
Yes, I think there are at least 2 types of institutionalization of community engagement in Latin American universities. The first one as a function of the institution, of the universities, and the second one as an academic function. If university extension or community engagement is a function of the institution, universities set up professional spaces to develop their plans of cultural dissemination or community engagement. But in the second way, the community engagement as a academic function, then you need to make a lot of profound transformation in the curricular level, in the teaching training, the evaluation, and so on. And I think that comes with these tensions that Ronaldo said, no? For example, this tension or this risk of losing the potential for action of the community engagement and critical university extension. There are a lot of tensions, no? The times and logics between extension and teaching, the budgets you need to develop plans of these characteristics and so on. No? But I think it's better to work in the discomfort of these tensions, putting these tensions to produce something new, something new that strengthens the public role of universities, that, as Rita said, all this is better than remaining calm in the purity of our marginality.
Thank you. We won't indulge in the purity of marginality. Yes, I think these tensions and contradictions are normal. And that allows me to pass a question which has been sitting there for a while. Shurbegan has asked a very important question, which we will turn to. But previously, someone asked, if all this work that we do is meant to be for the benefit of the community, how do we involve the community in the university decision-making around extension activities and its evaluation? If I was to answer that honestly, I would have to say not very well, but I'd like to hear your answers. The same order as before. Marcelo, do you want to kick off?
Oh, this is a very complicated question because, of course, the universities are, we tend to be really closed and self-sustained, and this kind of, you know, insulating space, and it's extremely difficult to make this happen. Of course, there are many challenges, and I think it's a process that you, as the university evolves and really institutionalize all these sectors, you can eventually, for example, create, as we created here at the University of Campinas, we created a kind of Senate, a commission for extension, that we have the participation of all schools and faculties from the university, but also external actors, external stakeholders as well, that are responsible for this. In other areas, just to mention, for example, we are working with from 2019, we started an inclusion process of indigenous people from different parts of Brazil, and now we have specific places where we hear and we have discussions with entities that represents these native Brazilians around the country. So it's always, as mentioned before by Agustin, full of tensions. And of course, we should never forget, also answering a question here I see in the chat by Shur, that it's difficult to implement, and which are the challenges? We have a university which is extremely, usually the research-intensive universities are driven by, some forces that goes towards the ranking systems that privilege the research among extension activities, for example, or even for teaching activities. And then we have to face all these tensions and all these problems within the university. So not only the external participation, but also internally, how to evaluate properly these activities and how to make incentives in order to have more quality and more initiatives with the students, with faculty members, with staff. So this is extremely difficult. By my optimistic view, on one side would say that it's a process that we are still learning, even in Latin America, which this is something that has been developed for more than 100 years, is still struggling to institutionalize that properly.
Thank you, Marcelo. Maria Rosa, has the UBA institutionalized its engagement with the community? What's your opinion there?
Well, there's a strong tradition of solidarity projects from the UBA. And I highlight the solidarity work because it speaks of a more horizontal approach and relation with the community. It's not the beacon of knowledge that goes to to drop the knowledge on the community, but just to learn with the community, and also in the planification of the projects to work along with the community. For instance, whenever the students of odontology go to a very isolated rural area with their truck to provide dental health, they work in the local schools where they provide the location to establish all the activities with the community. They work with the local practitioners, with the physicians, to provide to the community with long-term knowledge within the community, not to wait for every year for the UBA students to come to provide the health. So there's a lot of activities that are designed and developed with the community. And this is a great change because it's not just, okay, we think that we want to do this and we will go there and just do that, but it also leads to review how we do research. Do we do community-based research instead of research that can just go to a paper that will give us a lot of academic credits and that's it? And I want to highlight also what Marcelo was mentioning regarding the rankings. Rankings do not point on how we address the community. They don't showcase or give rewards about that. And that's meaningful. Why do we want our students to be the best students? Because we want them to be the best leaders to make the change in the community for a better engagement and more fair world. We understand what's going on in the community. So I know it's really challenging. I know it takes time, and it takes a lot of power within the university, because who will lead this process? That's why we need clear objectives on why we are doing this, to integrate this as a pedagogical approach about how we trust in our students that they can be the one who will be able to do the change in the future, how we address the community and go and work with the community, and why do we want knowledge? Just to put it in a library or just to make a better world for all of us?
Thank you very much, Maria Rosa. That throws up very fundamental questions. My friend in South Africa, Ahmed Bawa, always talks about the knowledge project. What is knowledge for? And a few years ago in South Africa, there was a big revolt around the sort of racist statues in Cape Town University and so on. And students argued that the university should be closed down, that they were no use to anybody. And what Ahmed said, it was striking how very few people in the university had a coherent answer to that. And clearly, if we're at a university, we should know why we are there. We should have a purpose. And I think that's where civic engagement comes in, because it does give a purpose, does give a goal. Thank you, Maria Rosa. Agustín, finalmente.
Well, I think that Marcelo and Maria Rosa answered this difficult question. But I think there are different levels. Some institutional spaces for consultation to some organized social actors to define research goals or research agendas. I think this is a level. And then there's a second level that I think is very important for this issue. That is the develop of permanent programs in communities or rural areas, territorial programs that build demand, as we said, or produce problems within communities, problems that could not previously be enunciated as such problems, or research problems. these permanent programs in communities and rural areas can help us to avoid this kind of knowledge extractivism, that sometimes academics used to make when they go to some community, social community, and with good intentions, and then never returns. No, with these permanent programs, you can go on in the next step, putting together a research moment with a second moment of intervention with teaching, and that is a way we are trying to cite here in Uruguay.
Thank you very much, Agustin. I think we have time for one more question, but I'm telling you, it's a difficult question posed by Sjoerd Bergan, who has kept this work going in Europe for many years, or should I say decades. You will have all seen this in the chat, and Marcelo referred to it. He asked what are the internal, external challenges faced in Latin America. Many, sure. But the question I'd like you to answer is, he then goes on to say, what can others learn from your experience? In other words, how can it be made transferable? I think it's a difficult question, and in some way maybe an unfair question. But if I was to ask you all, what's one transferable lesson? What's one take-home point you would each want to make based on the Latin American experience to someone in Alaska or wherever, or Siberia? What would you want to tell them from this experience? And Rita, I'd like to include you as an honorary Latin American in this. So we'll start again, Marcelo, and then Maria Rosa. You can think about it, Rita, a bit.
Yeah, well, indeed, it's very complicated because, of course, whenever you talk about the activities and we see, in the floor what is going on, and we see a lot of activities and many people which are engaged in very interesting projects, and we develop health systems, we develop cultural projects and so on, but we were not able yet to develop a set of indicators that would make this really comparable, reliable, and make, for example, the possibility to better showcase these activities. I told you that I was a little bit optimistic on one side, that this is a developing process. On the other side, I'm really pessimistic on how we are developing our activities. We all saw in the pandemic the response to this huge pandemic that we faced, and the appearance or resurging of anti-vax movements and denial of science as a way of thinking. We have seen an increase of autocracy in the world, with many governments that are denying the importance of higher education, the importance of science and technology, the innovation. And so in that sense, I would say that we should think to ourselves, and we are failing to this to our purpose in order to make better citizens, to rely on democratic values, and to really work for a better world for everyone. So we should think about how we can really multiply these effects, how we can communicate them better, and how universities can really make a difference. So this is something that we should do all together, and this kind of forum, this kind of associations that are developing these strategies are absolutely essential in order to do that. So this is
Thank you, Marcelo.
my final comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcelo. So yes, we can pull out of our bad situations by networking with others and sharing our resources. I think that's a point well made. Maria Rosa, what would be your angle on this question?
My angle will be first one. Sorry, mine first is very practical. Okay, now can you hear me? Okay, sorry. So, well, my first reaction is very practical. I'm sharing you through the chat some links to resources developed by CLAIS. And the final one, a book on institutionalization of service learning, where you can find more information about what we are doing from the University of Buenos Aires or other institutions to institutionalize service learning. And my first advice or recommendation would be not try to invent the wheel, just to talk with the faculties that are already doing something, even though it might be very little, with the community, to learn with them, to promote what they are doing, and then to try to systematize and help them to develop in a bigger scope. I think that's something that really will help to highlight what is already being done and learn from the experience of that particular faculty, but also with other institutions that we can identify that are already doing things to learn from the experience of others. That would be my small advice, because after working with so many different universities, we could see that it's possible. I'm more optimistic than you, Marcelo, even though, because, for instance, we are now working with Catholic University of Ukraine, and even though within the world, and I'm glad that Katia Reiners is here from Leuven University, because we have just started an Erasmus Plus project that we are just doing a small contribution from CLAIS, but this Erasmus Plus project is to help universities learn how to rebuild Ukraine through service learning. So how the students from architecture, communication, psychology, they can find a way to address people that within the world, they can find a way to learn better, and at the same, by serving the people in need, applying what they are learning. So it's a hard work, it's a lot of work, but we are still planting our trees, hoping that we will have a better future if we trust in our students and we commit with the community.
Thank you, Maria Rosa, and for your contribution today. Thank you very much. Agustin.
Well, I think there are not prescriptions, no? We need to have a clear purpose. We need to understand that the public commitment of university is not limited to the knowledge economy. We need humility and the willingness to listen and learn, and then the translation of that willingness into methodologies. We need to trust that people will take ownership of the universities, and then, as Maria Rosa said, experimenting and learn from our mistakes.
Thank you very much. Don't reinvent the wheel, learn from our mistakes, all good stuff. Rita, do you want to say a final word or two?
Simply to echo what my colleagues just shared, but again, to bring that to the global dialogue, we need to learn from best practices as well as mistakes. And I think given the long-standing traditions of the Latin American region and the rich experiences we've heard about today and from other colleagues as well in the region, just to learn from these experiences, these models, these different epistemologies that are from the global South, and bring that to our global dialogue.
Thank you very much, Rita. I think that nicely wraps up this session, and there are very rich learnings and transferable lessons we will be able to pull out of it after the event. I'd like to thank the speakers for coming along, but I'd also in particular like to thank all of the people who've attended today, and I hope that you've got something out of it. Also really need to thank David Locke and Carla for setting up this event. David, I was just wondering if you want to say a word or two to wrap up from the Magna Carta and your forthcoming events.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ronnie, for the opportunity to do that. Thank you for moderating our first webinar in this series. And I'd like to say how nice it is to collaborate with the Global Consortium in producing these things. I mean, together we are much stronger, and I think that has come through today. There will be 3 or possibly 4 more webinars, and we have your email addresses, and we will email the details to you when we have them. The first one will be in January. We don't yet have a date for the anniversary. We know that it will be in Washington. We know that we will be the guests of Johns Hopkins University. And our planning is that it will be in October. But again, we will email you all. And could I now invite you to complete the poll, which Carla will put up on the screen. And we would really welcome your suggestions for future events. So thank you, everybody, again. Thank you for joining us. My thanks to our speakers, Rita and yourself as well. And we look forward to seeing you again in the new year. Thank you.